welcome to the Trans in the City podcast. I'm Oscar Hoyle. I use they, them pronouns.
I'm Eva Echo. My pronouns are she, they, and this is called the Tea Break.
We hope.
Yeah, of course it is. Well, Pride Month is around the corner. We say Pride Month, and I've always found this really, really weird because it's not just June. Like we don't amp up the queer on 1st of June, nor do we stop being queer on 1st of July. And I think personally, I would love to see more recognition of Pride happening like throughout the year, whether it's local grassroots community stuff or, the smaller Pride events that usually take place April, May, all the way through to end of September.
hmm Oh, I so agree. I feel like for me, Pride is 365 days of the year,
Yeah.
really. I'm proud of who I am and what I've achieved every single day. And I think we should all be, right?
Yeah, shout about it all year round rather than just kind of containing it just to like 1 month. And I guess for me personally as well, I always feel like this about everything. Like Valentine's Day, if you're gonna buy your loved one a present, why are you saving up just for one day of the year? Um, if you want to buy them something, just buy them something. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like a reason. And I think there's this mentality of events that we are programmed to we're only allowed to celebrate, we're only allowed to buy gifts at certain times of the year.
And you've heard it here first, folks. Eva Echo expects flowers every single day.
Every single day. Not chocolates though, because I don't like chocolate. But flowers, I'll take flowers. But I think like coming up to Pride Month, if we want to call it that, to June, which is internationally recognised as the month of Pride. Um, I guess like what are your thoughts on where we're at this year, especially for the trans community, because it's been hell so far for the trans plus community with everything going on at government level, everything in the media. What do you think Pride is going to be like? Do you think it's going to be quite subdued?
I always think if there's one thing that a lot of us know how to do, it is have a good time and come together as a community and celebrate even the smallest of wins. So I do think from that perspective, Pride is still going to be, a celebratory, upbeat tone. But I think we can't forget the undertones this year. The UK has dropped once again in the ILGA Europe rankings. We just continue this downward spiral as a country. So I think that whilst Pride, we're going to use it as an opportunity to celebrate because there are so many amazing people, amazing accomplishments, amazing things that we should be celebrating as a community. But I do think for a lot of us, there's going to be a lot more of emphasis on actually focusing on creating change and
Mm,
community level activism. The appetite this year I've noticed from a lot of Pride organizers is to platform queer speakers, to platform activists, to platform people from the community that have a voice that are going to inspire other people to step up. And that's something that I think has been returning to prides for a little while, but I've
mm.
seen it the most this year, I think. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I have as well, and I think it's a recognition of the need to continue protesting. Whether it is through
Mm,
speaking openly about what's happening, galvanizing the community, recognizing it and acknowledging what's going on. Because I think a lot of the times we all know, taking the trans community as an example, we all know things we're in the shit right now. Like things are really bleak.
mhm.
We're looking at a section 28 for the trans community, and I think sometimes coming together and just being able to say it out loud and voicing it can be so cathartic because you you normally, you're kind of scrolling, doom scrolling on social media. You see what's happening, you hear it on the news, but you kind of have to hold it all in, and you don't have that outlet to be able to vent, to say those words out loud, and to hear other people say what you're thinking. And I think there is that solidarity, there's that community in being able to do that. And I think I love that the prides are doing that more this year in recognition of the need to come together and really take stock of what's going on, but also I guess to kind of recharge, come together as a community,
Mm.
recharge, find our collective energy, um, and uplift those who are particularly down, because we all have different coping mechanisms and different ways of dealing with it. And those who are most vulnerable, allow them to be able to draw from our energy, and pick themselves back up, whilst we also help them back up as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so important that we're creating spaces for those conversations, I feel, and I think especially as things do get harder for the community, we need those spaces more than ever.
Mm.
Um, but I wonder, is this the direction that you see Pride's going in? I mean, you're the director of innovation at Birmingham Pride, right? So you must be quite heavily involved in the direction of Pride organisations. Where do you see the future of Pride celebrations, Pride protests, Pride festivals going?
I think for me and the work that I do with Birmingham Pride, it's like kind of walking a fine line between the celebration element, which is vital because we don't get celebrated enough as a community, but also the protest element, but also like doing the work as well, because, you know, as we said at the start, it's 365, we need to be thinking about the community, we need to be working for the community. So as director of innovation, it's my job to kind of look at what the community needs, what can we do to improve our lives throughout the year, and whether that's, like tackling hate crime, looking at how we can involve the community with working with the criminal justice system so that they can be heard. We can learn from each other and tackle hate crime more efficiently. Um, to looking at community events, other initiatives that we've probably overlooked because we think, well, there's already a service out there. There may not be a dedicated service. Every area, whether it's a city, a town, or even a little village, has its own needs, and I think we need to recognize what are those needs and how do we create the opportunities for those people, so that their needs can be met and nurtured. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about working with Birmingham Pride. We're a small team, but we're all completely on board with that, and it's through our actions and through what we're trying to do that slowly evolves Pride, and keeps it going, but also keeps it fresh for the current generation and also the new generation, so that they feel that they can get involved as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I really like what you're saying around Pride being more than like the one activity. We fall into that trap sometimes, don't we, of
Mm.
thinking, London Pride is this weekend and this is all that that organization does. But I think it's been really clear to me through working with so many Pride organisations over the last year, the time I was volunteering for Pride in Surrey, that actually the work for Pride organisation is 365 days of the year, and it's something that I've carried through with me to Blossom as well. Actually, is that I never just do one big event. I would rather never do a big event where we get 300 people in a room and consistently focus on delivering those groups to 10 to 15 to 20 people because they need it the most and they need
Mm.
it regularly than just delivering a boom one-off event. And I agree with you. I think that is the direction that we're seeing activism, community change making, and celebration going is across a whole year. It's
Yeah,
just so
definitely.
important.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, like, I love a big festival as much as the next
Hmm.
person, but it's tiring. Like, being involved in one weekend, essentially working that whole weekend, and enjoying it at the same time. I couldn't imagine doing that at another big festival and at another weekend. It's exhausting. I would love to kind of, like, as you say, do the smaller ones, but also reach smaller groups of people, because you can spend more time with them. You can offer more of yourself to those groups and help them and listen to them, be there and create that space for them. Whereas large festivals are great, but at the same time, we've got to kind of focus on the smaller areas. And I always think big prides are amazing because of the large numbers of people that they can pull together. But also, the real change will happen from the smaller prides, like the smaller villages, the towns, where people would historically travel to the local city for involvement in any sort of pride or festivities. But I love seeing more and more smaller prides emerging. And even if it's like 15 people walking down the road holding banners, that's their parade. Great. That is their parade because they are saying to their peers, we're here. We
Mm.
shouldn't have to go somewhere else to celebrate who we are. If we want to do it on our own streets, we're doing it on our own streets. And see so many more prides spring up because of that, and who are so proud of their own little roots. I think that's fantastic, and we need to support them.
Massively. I mean, last year, obviously, I had the absolute pleasure of being walking right at the front of London Pride, and I can't lie, it's a memory that I'm never going to forget. And likewise,
Mm.
leading Brighton Pride of Trans People Are Loved, that was an experience. Yeah, I mean, maybe not as nice because it was torrential rain and
I saw the
really cold
photo.
and windy, and my t-shirt went see-through. It was very overwhelming. Um, but both of those are experiences that I will absolutely never forget. But in that same breath, the conversations that I've had, I don't necessarily remember. Whereas the conversations that I've had at small local grassroots pride events have been ones that have touched me and have carried on with me throughout all of the work that I do. The needs that people express, the absolute, captivation of a
Mm,
trans young person that lives in the back end of nowhere, but is finally getting to see that there are people like them in their village. That
yeah.
is something that I take away just as important. And I agree. We're seeing Basingstoke having their first ever Pride this year. We're seeing Pride and Surrey having their largest ever Pride. We're last year Cowbridge Pride, this year Cowbridge Pride. Sorry, like
Yeah.
it's so important that we're engaging with these smaller
Oh,
institutions.
definitely. And last year, Trans in the City were at Chippenham Pride, and
That
I
was the
remember,
one.
I remember, like, yeah, it's those things, it's those like almost core memories that you will always hang on to. Like for me, driving into Chippenham and finding our way to where we needed to be, but seeing families all decorated with their flags really colourful,
Yeah.
making their way into the town centre, and they'd all really made an effort. And when we got to the town centre, we parked up, and as we were kind of having a wander around, to see local shops changing their displays. There was one charity shop that will stand out, and they changed their mannequins, the clothing on the mannequins, so that what they were wearing represented the colours of the pride flag. And it's just little gestures like that which will really stay with, I mean, they stayed with me, but they're really going to stay with the people of Chippenham, people who are just mooching around, who maybe not, they don't even know that Pride is happening, but they see that and it will stick with them. So I absolutely love that for the smaller prides, and I think it works towards this a wider piece in terms of education as well. Like we've mentioned already that we're looking down the barrel of a Section 28 for the trans plus community um, on the horizon, and if if it does pan out, I mean, it may not do yet because they don't have much time to really push much through remaining parliamentary time. But if it does get shoehorned in somehow, those prides are going to be even more vital for the education side of it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, children, they need to know, don't they? They need to know that they're not alone. They need to know that their experience is one that is shared, that
Mm,
whilst they are definitely unique, that they're not completely alone. And I think it really does scare me, the new proposed guidance. I can't see it passing personally. I feel as though this is a
no,
distraction technique from the fact that our schools are crumbling, that we have a teaching shortage, that
yeah,
we have a lack of skilled work in the UK. However, it's obviously very scary, and I think that we need to make sure that our institutions are ready and prepared in case things like
mm,
this do happen. And whilst I 100% agree with you that we need to be prepared to do this for schools, we can't forget equally that workplaces have a part to play in this too.
mm,
We currently have a workforce in the UK where the majority of the workforce was educated during Section 28, so have
mm,
very little idea about our community. Um, and if not during, then before. which equally would mean that their education is incredibly outdated around trans and non-binary and LGBT generally. So I think it doesn't just end there, does it? We have to make
No.
sure that we're working and engaging businesses too.
Absolutely. And allowing people to talk, because I think right now there's this, we have it handed down to us that this is what the country wants. The country doesn't want gender identity being taught, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, yesterday it was announced that 61% of Brits actually, wanted gender identity to be taught in schools. And that, considering that, especially like my generation, we lived through Section 28, the OG version, and there's a
Mm,
massive gap in knowledge. I didn't come out till later on in life because I just didn't see any of that. And even though you see it a bit later on in life, because it's not a part of who you are, that there was never that recognition that you could be who you truly are. You it doesn't really form any sort of foundation within your life, so it's really difficult to acknowledge that section of it. And then knowing that I wanted to kind of look at, okay, well, what are my queer roots, and then finding there's hardly anything. It's difficult, and I think workplaces can do so much, because what I don't know, my colleague might know, and we can fill those gaps in together. And I think if we enable organizations to really let their queer colleagues talk about these experiences, it's going to be great for productivity because they're going to feel a lot more accepted. It's going to be great for future generations that may want to work there as well, because they're creating this brand new culture that is incredibly accepting. And I think we just have to let them. And I think if this so-called Section 28 does happen, I think there's going to be a lot more where pride organizations, organizations, workplaces can really step up. Just move away from the performative once a year stuff. Let's really say, okay, we're being failed in this area, so let's really step up and let's make a difference in this area over here.
mm. And of course, this would be a shameless time not to plug the Trans in the City training and speaking services that we offer to businesses. Not that I'm on company line or anything here, but we can help in that space if we needed to. But back into our conversation there, that was a quick ad break. Something that I just picked up on that you mentioned, which is so important, is not being performative.
Mm.
And sometimes, there's different reasons why we fall into performativity when it comes to change and activism. Sometimes it's because it's the only way that you're handed a lanyard, you're told it's great for allyship if you wear this lanyard in work. You don't necessarily know what comes next after you wear the lanyard.
Yeah.
Through to purposeful or intent performative allyship or activism.
Mm.
Where do you stand? Where do we draw the line between change, representation, being visible, and then also not falling into being performative?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think it comes in stages. I think the first stage is you have to want to change. You have to want to be part of essentially a movement. You've got to want to be part of this movement forward where we recognize things aren't working for everyone and they need to work for everyone, especially in the workplace. So that's the first stage. Okay, once we've acknowledged the desire, the need to change, how? And you've got to believe in that change. You've got to understand the change, and that's where education comes in. And yeah, Trans in the City has a really comprehensive training package for organizations of all levels. But we put that out there because we recognize the need for education, because people hate because they fear. They fear because they don't understand. And if we can create that education, we can fill in the gaps of knowledge. We can then bring people with us, because I always say that, like, I've had a lifetime to come to terms with who I am inside my own head. Even when I've not necessarily had the words, I've not necessarily had the representation that I can see internally, having this almost like this monologue, this conflict where you're wrestling with who you think you should be versus who you are. You're making sense of it, and allies, those who are queer but aren't out yet, those who are young, they don't have that chance. And I think we need to afford them the chance to learn, to be able to catch up, to go on that journey together, rather than saying, hey, here's your lanyard, you're now officially an ally. Because ally is a noun and a verb, and you can't have one without the other. So if you're going to wear that lanyard, you are going to say you're an ally. Great, but how will you demonstrate that you're an ally? That's the most important thing. And again, it comes down to education. If you are educated on the struggles, the needs, what you can do better, sharing privilege, you won't be performative because you will automatically understand how you can benefit those people and start to shape the culture for the better for them. And I think once we work through those two stages, it becomes automatic. And I guess it comes down to like tick boxing. And I know that things shouldn't have to be a tick box exercise, but I guess as with anything in its infancy, it needs to be, because that's the only way to guarantee something is accounted for, something is acknowledged, and something is ultimately done about it. And I guess over time, as it becomes more habitual, you won't need the tick box because it's ingrained in the culture. So I think tick boxes are great if it means making sure it's the start of change, just as long as you're not doing a tick box because you have no clue what to do. You think June's rolling around, I've got to do something. Have I done this, this, and this? Yes, great. For me, you're not believing in that change. You're not doing it properly. And that then falls into the performative category.
Yeah, and you're so right. And I think every year we see the same debate about
Mm.
rainbow logos come up, right? And that's a perfect example, isn't it? It's like, oh, June's coming, quick, better upload the rainbow logo, and then
Yeah,
that's that. And it has to be more, right? You have to want
yeah,
to put the rainbow logo up because you genuinely believe in LGBTQ plus inclusion, and you have to be able to back that up. There's no
yeah,
point just putting
absolutely.
it up. What are you doing on a daily basis? And how are you supporting queer people? Or even, do you know what, even during Pride Month, what nonprofit are you raising money for?
Mm.
Things like that. I think that's what's so important, is that, like you say, there is intent behind the tick box almost.
I think I'm personally at the point where if they are raising money or donating to LGBTQ plus charities during Pride Month, it's great. And as much as we all love a bit of cash to
Yeah.
help with community projects and initiatives, I think we need to go beyond that because you can't buy your way out of, performative
Mm-hmm.
allyship. Um, Come June the 1st, you've changed your profile picture, your organization's profile picture. Great, but when you do it, I want people to kind of ask, why are we doing it? And I don't want, if
Mm.
the answer is because it's Pride Month, that's the wrong answer. Why are you genuinely doing this? Is it for your employees? Is it for your clients? What are you trying to say when you do this? And I think there needs to be that answer behind the scenes before they go ahead and do it. Um, yeah, give money to the charities, great, but do more. Don't just buy your
Mm,
way out and say,
mm.
I've given 50,000 to this particular group. That's my job done. There's so much more you can do. And sometimes you don't need money. Sometimes lending your organization's weight behind a message, for example, trans rights, equality, even things, like, creating comprehensive healthcare packages for those queer employees that you have, something like that will stand the test of time and is more impactful than any chunk of money could be.
Yeah. Also, I think we see through it
Yeah.
as consumers, don't we? In the sense that, you look at Bud Light last year, and their campaign with Dylan Mulvaney went absolutely shockingly.
Mm,
And even LGBTQIA plus people weren't necessarily interested in the campaign. But this year, E45 have launched this stunning advert around trans people in their own personal bathrooms at home, and talking about, as trans people, our experiences in the bathroom, why they're so important to us, and why it's so much more than just using the toilet. It's a
Mm,
place to rest. It's a place to be free from society, from the stresses. And you can tell one was developed to secure business by a marketing team, and one was developed because they genuinely believed in spotlighting trans voices, trans people. They wanted to provide their platform to
mm.
them, and they consulted at every step of the way. And the reaction to the two from within the LGBT community has just been so starkly different.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad the E45 campaign is happening, and I was actually approached for a casting call for that. And when I read the brief for what they were trying to do, what they were hoping to achieve, I absolutely fell in love with it like straight away because yeah, it's a completely different take, and you could tell straight away there was 100% buy-in at all levels, and that they were committed to making sure that this happened, and it happened respectfully in a very genuine way, and they used their platform for the community. um I didn't get the part. I'm not bitter. That's fine. But at the end of the day, I think
Absolute travesty.
I know I've now switched to Avino. No, I haven't. I think it doesn't, for me, no, it doesn't matter who's part of that campaign. The fact that the campaign is happening is the most important thing. And the
Yeah.
fact that it's coming from a company who is known for making, well, like moisturizing cream, essentially, for topical lotions that for people with problematic skin and things like that. They've actually identified that there are a group of people who could benefit from our products and do use, their products. Um, that may have otherwise been overlooked. And they've basically said, hang on a minute, we see you and we're going to platform you. And the result is amazing compared to Bud Light, which is almost like a hit and run. This kind of typical fast advertising where it's smash and
Hmm.
grab, and 1 minute it's there, next minute it's yesterday's campaign, everyone's moved on. Bud did not stick behind Dylan at all. At the first sign
No.
of trouble, they absolutely folded. And I think, it comes back to the stages. Do you truly believe in what you're doing? And have you then done the education yourself to empower yourself with the knowledge to be able to stand firm in the belief of what you did? Um, and the results, as you've said quite rightly, are so stark, and you can tell, and we see through all stuff like that.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
we're skeptical, we're a skeptical and kind of cautious group, but
Which we have to be.
yeah, we're our lives are political footballs, and we see through stuff like that, like a cheap pride flag, like a cheap knockoff pride flag. We'll see right through that. And I think now you've got to step up. It's more than about money. It's more than about this. Are we going to do a commercial featuring you? What is the commercial? It's how we're going to feature you. We want to know more. You can't simply just tick a box, buy us off by saying that you're trying to do this gesture. We want more than just the gesture.
Mhm, mhm. I'm really starting to see it. Recently, I've had the absolute pleasure of working with so many more media outlets than we have over the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of them I refuse to work with, and continue to this day. I won't work with certain outlets. But
Mm,
I when a journalist approaches me, I can often tell the intent, you know,
mm,
the way that they talk about the community, whether they get the acronym in the right order,
yeah.
whether they just generally understand the topic that they're talking about, or whether they're just producing a fluff piece to fill some articles or to win some clickbait. And I think that
Mm,
it's the same thing again, right? Is that we can see through intent, and
yeah.
you can read through the lines. And what has been so touching over the last few weeks is actually how many outlets are getting in touch, and genuinely are upset, genuinely upset about the RSHE guidance, are genuinely upset
Mm,
about the gender questioning children on statutory guidance, are genuinely worried about the raised levels of threat against
mm,
LGBT people during Pride Month. And then I have no problem talking with them at all.
yeah.
And it's nice to feel as if with certain outlets, there is a return to just genuine people wanting to do genuine things, which I think was lost over the last few years and
Yeah.
is also coming back to journalism. I don't know how, don't know what they've done. I don't know who's resigned. Wink, wink.
I mean, I think that comes as a recognition of the fact that as a community, we're not willing to just sit there and take it anymore. We see through it and we call them out on that. And I think they recognize that that is what's happening. And I don't know about you, but I always find that when I know when I'm going to get a journalist contact me because they start following me on social media like 2 or 3 days before, and I know they're going through all my stuff. And I see that, and it's like this pattern that they all do. Um, but it's this kind of recognition that they understand that if they want a story, whether it's a fluff piece, whether it's a hit piece, whether they genuinely want to tell your story, um, it's almost like they've realized now we have to play by the community's rules. We can no longer just twist what they say and do what we want. They're there to do, they're there for a purpose. They're there to tell our
Mhm,
story and not to make it up. And
mhm,
I think, there's this, I'd like to say, growing recognition amongst journalists that's the way forward. Um, but you only have to look at certain publications and how their readership is in decline. There's one that's moved towards creating its own podcast, which I've had a very quick listen to, one snippet. It was dull. And, when you can't sell papers and you then need to move towards a podcast, that says a lot because, for them, they understand things aren't working the way that have, in the way that has historically worked for them. They need to move with the times. So therefore, let's do that. And I think with journalists, a lot of them being freelance these days, they need the work, and to get the work they
mhm,
need to tell the stories respectfully, and they're
mhm.
not going to do that if it's just clickbait stuff.
Yeah. No, yeah, completely agree with you. And thank goodness. I mean, things are tough. Things are really
Mm,
tough. But what I'm certainly a huge advocate for at the moment, and I think this is reflective in the journalism that I'll engage with, is spotlighting our success and
mm,
actually creating some positivity. I suppose it brings us back to our initial conversation around the purposes of pride and pride
mm,
events, is that we do need to celebrate a bit more. And something that I'm trying to dedicate more of my time and energy to, as somebody who I suppose is starting to establish a bit of credibility within the sector, only a small tad,
you are
and I'll ruin
very
that when we get
credible,
to
Oscar,
Epstein.
and I won't hear
Um,
anything else otherwise.
but is actually focusing on what we're doing well as a society
Mm,
and a community, and what we are winning, because I almost feel as though, and I know that people will disagree with this, is that we want to build empathy and compassion towards queer people, and whilst shocking statistics do that, and whilst sad articles do that, it's mentally draining for
mm,
us as activists or people involved in change. And I'm trying so hard to spotlight the wins, because that
yeah.
equally builds empathy and compassion. Seeing a successful, positive, happy trans young person who's just got their first promotion in a job, or hearing a good news story about something positive that's happened, a win for the community, I think shows just as much
Mm,
compassion and builds just as much empathy, because people can relate equally as hard to sadness or happiness. And
yeah.
I'm trying to focus on creating that positive space now, and almost leaving behind the transphobic and anti-trans narrative, because it's going to be there, it's going to exist, but
Yeah.
I don't want to engage in that. I don't want to welcome that energy into my life. And there are people that
Exactly.
do, and they need to be, but that's not for me.
No, and I think we need to move away from that as a whole because we are more than we're more than just like the trauma porn element.
Mm,
We've all had struggles. We've all had to really drag ourselves through so much. But rather than focus on that, focus on what we're doing now, what we're doing to thrive, to really be happy. Why aren't we focusing on that? The wins, I think, because we don't talk about the wins enough, we just have this almost like a collective pessimistic mindset. And I think the more we put the joy, the positivity out there and displace the negativity, the more that we can stand tall and be proud. So that when things, do come along that really knock us, that really make us think things are getting worse, then we can weather the storm. We'll get through it. And one of the things I've been telling people recently is, legislation, whatever legislation they throw at us, whatever they bring in as law, can be undone. So that's not the difficult part. The difficult part is making sure that we survive it and that we can move through this dark period and still thrive. And I think that resilience and showing people that resilience, and journalists saying, you know what, that is a beautiful piece. I see something in that. I'm going to write about that. That's what we need out there. I read an article recently about how within the civil service they are considering strikes at the moment because of the transphobic policies that are being churned out. That is a huge act of allyship. The fact that at
Hmm.
that level, people are like, you know what? No, this is enough. This is wrong. And we're going to do what we can to take a stand against it. And I'm not saying everyone in any organization needs to take that level of action, but whenever we talk about strikes or protests, it comes it's born out of frustration, and it comes at a time when people have said this is no longer acceptable to us, we are going to do something about it. So I'd love that to happen, but I'd love the movement to be, we're no longer going to take this negativity about us, we want to put out positivity. And I want that movement, this I've had enough movement to be, I've had enough of the negative, let's put out the positive and let's focus on the positive.
Yeah. So strongly agree. And before anybody comes for us, we're not preaching about toxic positivity here. We're talking
No.
about genuine positivity and
Yeah.
celebration while still acknowledging that hardships exist. I mean, we could talk all day, but I feel like we've got to a really nice topic to wrap this up on, really focusing on positivity. But I suppose, Eva, if you had to give one piece of advice for somebody over this Pride Month, what would it be?
Ooh, good question. I would say be your own kind of beautiful, because it's a difficult month, like, where we look around and we think, well, I should be that happy, I should be that bold, I should be so visible, and it's not possible for everyone. Just be you. You're beautiful in your own way, and as long as you accept you, however you present, however you celebrate, however you protest, that's great. Don't compare yourself to anyone else, because you ultimately bring yourself to the bigger party, and that party is going to thrive. How about you? What would you say?
Do you know, mine would be have whatever you do, have an amazing time over this month and the month after and the month after that.
Yeah.
Remember that your pride and your joy doesn't exist for this one month and that you should be prideful and joyful every month of the year, but also to look after each other, be there for each other, stand strong as, one connected, powerful community.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a great way to end the podcast.
Lovely.
Ah, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Bye.